Thanks for joining us on The Word with Sumukhi and Damien B. Davis. The Word, a podcast to promote unity, diversity, and harmony.
So what's the word?
The word is spiritual bypass.
Spiritual bypass.
When you are in a lot of these spiritual worlds, you sort of know it by hanging out with people. You see the spiritual bypass. What I call the woo-woo, the woo-woo-woo-woo-woo-ness.
Usa, the woo-woo.
The woo. Do you have any experience with the woo, Damien?
With the woo-woo. I want to say yes. I'm waiting to hear more information or specifics on your woo-woo experience.
Okay, well, we'll start with what spiritual bypassing is, like from the transpersonal psychology world.
Mm-hmm.
Spiritual bypassing was coined by the psychologist John Wellwood. And then from what I've read, it was actually inspired by Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche, who is a spiritual Buddhist monk teacher who started the Shambhala Center in Colorado, but came from Tibet. The actual term spiritual bypassing refers to the use of spiritual practices and beliefs to avoid dealing with uncomfortable feelings, unresolved wounds, and fundamental emotional and psychological needs. He says it not only distances us from our pain and difficult personal issues, but also from our own authentic spirituality, standing us in a metaphysical limbo, a zone of exaggerated gentleness, niceness, and superficiality.
Ooh, yeah. There's a lot of that.
There's a lot of that.
There is a lot of that.
Well, when we look at, it's like spirituality as a practice. So there's sort of like that difference between spirituality and religion.
Yes.
There's one that spirituality is your own deep sense of spirit and your own deep sense of your own soul being one with a greater whole, with something bigger than one's idea of oneself. Religion as a whole, when not marked by a deep spirituality, seeks to keep people in a box or an identity with a group outside of oneself, which is to keep a person from really, really expressing one's authentic voice or self in order to please an outer group.
Yes. Spirituality has been and always will be internal as opposed to modes of acting.
We're really going into like that realm of group thinking, society, social, religiosity versus authentic spirituality. It's like that dance between, hey, there are all these spiritual practices, and these practices include rituals, whatever religion it may come from. So the rituals of Hinduism may be different from the rituals of Islam, may be different from the rituals of Catholicism or Christianity. These rituals are performed by groups of people, and these groups of people then believe or truly have an experience within the ritual of transcendence, of lifting themselves out of worry and defeat and
ego and
sadness, depression, anger, frustration, impatience, you name it, all of these different things that happen to human beings. But then the idea is that when you're not doing that ritual and someone cuts you off in traffic, what do you do? Right?
Yeah, it's a person maintain the characteristics of, what they're trying to aim for or the state they're trying to maintain.
That's really the idea. Like, I'm going to look like a master. I'm going to utter sounds the way that I've heard masters or gurus or priests or prophets say.
Yeah, I'm going to do the show.
Do the show. And I think that's the thing with spiritual bypass. Like, you do the show not just for others, but you're actually doing a show for yourself. I mean, the underlying issue with it, I've been teaching yoga forever. It feels like over 20 years, forever in time and space land. I've been very much a big proponent of people who come to yoga, especially for the deeper spiritual aspects of it, because they're not for the faint of heart.
Yes.
It's not downward dog, what we do in yoga, truly from, the scriptures of yoga, which are from Patanjali, Bhagavad Gita, if we want to go all the way back to the Vedic scriptures of the Rig Veda. That kind of yoga, it's not
It's not hands off, spiritually speaking.
It's not just physical exercise. Stand on your head, stand on your hands, stand on your feet or whatever. Have good posture, which is the very popular forms of Hatha yoga. And certainly Hatha yoga has its place. I'm not saying that. And I have taught that to help with the psychological aspects and then the deeper spiritual aspects of yoga.
Yes.
As a deep spiritual being, it's like that's what you're really working on is your character.
Yes.
It's like no matter what anybody thinks of me, I understand who I am. Something that makes you then far above everybody else creates this kind of sheen, this idea that you are glossier and more golden and better than everyone else. And that is still a huge ego play.
Oh, yeah. It's at the same point in time saying that your true self or authentic self is not worth it. That you're trying to shed yourself in a way for this other bad idea of better. You just discount yourself. All this add-on, even though it's ego involved, it's a rejection or trying to fluff up something because you don't see the value in it.
That's exactly it. It's like the not being above your feelings of nervousness.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, guys, I'm feeling nervous at the moment. It's not that.
Yeah.
It's more not stuffing it down. Having worked with a lot of people, my suggestion always is if you really want to do these deeper, like the deeper work of yoga, either one, such a strong foundation psychologically, or find a great therapist because the shit's going to come up. It's going to come up.
Yeah. And how do you
deal with that?
How do you deal with it, or how do you face it, or if you have issues facing whatever it is, or the pain is deep, or, you just need someone to give you insight so you don't fall into a delusion. You always need someone to help you with checks and balances. You could say Captain Crunch is God, and if there's no one there to say otherwise and tell you it's just a box of cereal, you could believe that, and that would be your God or your idol without challenge.
But think about it, Damien. Everybody worships some form of Captain Crunch.
Break it down for me.
I mean, you want me to break it down for you?
Break it down for me. Break it down for the listener.
For everybody, right?
For everybody.
Let's look at that. The world is made of mass consumerism. Mm-hmm. So anytime we decide that we are the next big thing is like, your iPhone. Mm-hmm. Or it's like the next big device, right? You worship that for a while. And then, it doesn't work anymore. I need a better one.
You need a new God.
I need a new God. Perhaps it's everywhere. That's consumerism is just taking over this whole planet. The big consumer thing becomes that thing that everybody worships for a while. And you look at different stages of one's life, right?
Like TikTok.
It's a God. It's got power. It makes you a God. Makes you powerful.
Clothing.
Yeah. Your car, your house. Check out my house. Worship it. Worship. It's a form of saying, worship me. I'm great. And that kind of thing, that ideology is also what pushes rock stars and actors and 5 seconds of fame. I'm really, really into this and I'm going to be into something else, right? That kind of thing then projected onto spirituality. Jesus is cool. Tomorrow, Jesus isn't cool. I'm really, really into, Buddha. And Buddha looks like this, and then I do that, and I sit cross-legged, and I gaze at my third eye, and all of that kind of outer play about anything. When you have a culture that's set up to say, success means that it's like worship John Travolta, and John Travolta is it, and he's like this, and it's like...
and John Travolta was a god when Saturday Night Live came out.
Oh man, he was God.
In a white suit.
He was God.
Doing his dance on the electric floor, Yeah.
I'm not saying that John Travolta isn't God. It's just when he isn't really God. It's just when you get to that point of like, hey, okay, so I'm meditating or I'm chanting or I'm doing these spiritual practices and something actually happens. Something deep actually happens and you're like, oh God, what do I do with this? I think I'm going to go and behave showing myself a certain way over here.
Yeah.
That's like the bypass.
Oh, yeah. You're using spirituality as a shield as opposed to, a shield or a mask. Because sometimes when you really go in, you get surprised by some things that come up that can terrify you or scare you or make you feel naked and vulnerable, which is, I think, appropriate. At some point in time, you have to feel comfortable in your nakedness and comfortable in your vulnerability because that's where great strength is. That's one thing I learned from my mother as far as strength coming from not being stoic and standing with your back straight, but being vulnerable and being honest and saying, I don't like this. Or, you know what, this hurt me. I need for it to stop, as opposed to laughing it off or trying to play like, oh, it really doesn't bother me, or, the coarse joking kind of thing. That's one thing that I get from my mother when I was very young. I mean, throughout life, is just her ability to be vulnerable, but be strong in the vulnerability. Like, to be honest, like, this is much, or this is a lot for me to handle, or it's very difficult, or I'm having issue. And to be able to stand in that vulnerability and not even tolerate someone dismissing or making fun of or joking about that vulnerability, being in that authenticity of feeling, as opposed to someone trying to dismiss it or saying, oh, what's the big deal? Why are you being so sensitive? It's just like, well, I'm sensitive about this in this area. That kind of strength while being honest and authentic.
It's beautiful.
Yeah, it's one of the many things she definitely taught me growing up. My father added to that, if you need to cry, so, sometimes you need to cry on your own. Or in private, and be constructive about it. It's like God gave you tears for a reason. Otherwise you'll be like that guy pointing up at the sky, kicking a can down the street, talking to the air. You have to sometimes take a knee. When you got to bow out, you got to bow out. It's like there's no shame in it. Everyone has to take a knee from time to time, or find a way station, or lick their wounds, because you're human. If you're human, you're vulnerable. You have weaknesses and problems and issues. There's no way around it. Anyone saying otherwise is lying, unless, you are a god.
There's actually a concept called the Wu Wei, right? And it's really...
Well, I mean, there's also Wu Shu, which is also a way. So I'm wondering whether the Wu Wei and Wu Shu, there's a combination, bastardization, melange of meaning for the woo-woo.
Right, the woo-woo. The wu-wei means in Chinese, I think this is Wikipedia. Donate to Wikipedia, everyone. Wu-wei means in Chinese non-doing or doing nothing.
What? Really? Is that like doing nothing in a Zen, Go no Rin show, which is Japanese, but void mind space?
It's Taoist. Taoism came up with a woo wei. I'm not actually, it sounds like I'm being facetious.
Well, because there's woo now, but the wu wei is quite old, and wu shu is, I'm sure, somewhere in the wu wei, because that's martial arts.
Right. So you think about it, and I think of it as like alliteration on so many levels to English, right? Because Western mind will pull up something like the Wu Wei. It's the way of the Wu, right? Like, whereas in Chinese, actually, Wei, like a different pronunciation, really. But Wushu is a form of Kung Fu.
Yes. But I feel like there's a way in a philosophy in that, because, wushu is it's a martial arts, which is external movement, has a lot to do with the internal. It's not just point system and belt colors, which is what makes me wonder whether, the Wu Wei and the Wushu
have some intersection. Yeah, they probably do.
Empty mind, or that kind of thing, which is worth a research.
I bring up the Wu Wei because I found that living over in the Bay Area.
The Bay.
Not to just to be fun about the Bay Area. Because there's lots of good things about the Bay Area. There was just some really interesting things like the Wu Wei. The Wu Wei is a philosophy that has been embraced by a lot of external things. Now, there's actually a Wu Wei cafe. No, nothing on them. I mean, it's a great cafe. But I just found that everywhere I turned, there was like some reference to the Wu Wei everywhere. And that's why I even looked it up. I'm like, what is this with the Wu Wei? I'm like, does this have to do with why we say that woo-woo stuff? Like when we talk about spirituality being a form of bypass, really. It's literally like with the woo-woos, it's like you can't have a straight conversation with them. The concept of Wu Wei from the Taoist perspective is actually quite beautiful.
All right. Do you want to delve into the state of like emptiness, I'm assuming, when it says, doing nothing?
It literally means natural action.
Oh, okay.
Natural.
All right.
Yeah, like...
flow, like ocean waves and wind and trees billowing and birds flying, people walking.
And I guess that's the question, right? Like in today's world where it seems we're a little bit removed from nature, or can be.
A lot bit.
And, like with climate change, with our over-reliance on technology and all of that, how do we practice?
Yeah. And we also have a lot of wonderful, gorgeous distractions created for us in this age that are fantastic. You know, they're amazing things to take up time, kill time. I mean, it's not good, but it's just,
Isn't that interesting too? Even like, it's like the kill time.
Yeah, kill time.
Why are we killing time?
Which we cannot get back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fundamentally, I really do believe like that the Bay Area and San Francisco and the West Coast have had much more of a natural way of being because of all of the influence of Eastern cultures on that coast, like from China, the Philippines, from India. There's
Japan, sure.
a lot of history. Yeah, Japanese culture, that kind of thing. But because of the extremism of capitalism dominating the Bay Area with this sort of underlying philosophy of the Wu Wei. I mean, what does that mean to really truly live the Wu Wei without being woo-woo or spiritually bypassing?
Well, but it always comes down to, being authentic. I mean, you could even accidentally join a cult, but if you're...
Which is so easy to do nowadays.
Yeah. Which technically I kind of did when I was young, but that's another story. That's another story. It was called a cult in the paper. I just thought it was a little extreme to call it a cult, but I don't regret a thing. I thought it was the greatest, experience, and I think if you're honest with it, trying to find a spiritual path, even if someone's trying to steer you wrong on doctrine. I know you're trying to suppress your laughter. You're like, what? That even if people are not trying to show you or treat you right, and you're reading or really trying to pursue what you're studying, you'll still get blessed, You'll still be blessed. You'll still come out on top.
Right. So yes.
I can only imagine what you're imagining. What I'm saying. You're like, sure, Damien. Right.
No. I guess it's just all too true on so many levels. Like it's so easy to join a cult nowadays.
You're like, I thought this, oh, wait, this is not working out. After a while, sometimes it takes you a minute to get clued in. I saw a documentary on Scientology, and there was a guy who was really deeply into it and in Hollywood, and he went through each level.
Tom Cruise, is that the guy?
This guy was willing to
another guy.
This guy was willing to do interviews.
John Travolta is a Scientologist, and
Oh yeah, there's a lot of Hollywood actor Scientologists. They talked about, obviously, Tom Cruise a bit, but this guy was, one of the faithful and had been there for a long time. They explained the levels and how to spiritually grow and the information that gets revealed to you further along or whatever. And then he got to a point where he was like so high level. He's like, okay, this is like one of the additional knowledge or books you need to read that's covered. And he began to read it, and he was thinking, oh, this is a test, like a test to see whether I'm an idiot or just, believe any old crazy thing. And then after a while, reading it, he's like, okay. She's like, no, that's really the text. He's like, wait, I'm supposed to believe what this is saying right here? And at that point in time, like everything became clear to him. And he was like, oh no, I got bamboozled, or I wasted my time. He said the thing that he immediately felt was embarrassed. He was embarrassed. He was embarrassed that he could have dedicated so much of himself and his time to something that was this ridiculous. Because it was talking about like spaceships. It sounded like basically was an L. Ron Hubbard like science fiction novel. Because he was like, this is a sci-fi story.
It's such a perfect example of like you can set yourself up to worship anything that suddenly like you're really in a cult. Do you remember that song back in the 80s, The Cult of Personality?
Oh, of course. That Living Color. It's a beloved band. Cult of Personality.
Cult of Personality. It's just such a great song. Great song.
To this day, tonight. It's still good tonight.
It's still good.
Oh, yeah.
So the Cult of Personality, is that...
We're experiencing that right now with Tangerine Nightmare.
Exactly. Anybody could, it's easy.
Yeah.
On such... I think Efron, is that his name? Hubbard, who created Scientology?
L. Ron Hubbard. I thought you said Zach.
L. Ron.
Yeah, you said Zac Efron.
Zac Efron did not create Scientology.
Yes. I think it's L. Ron Hubbard.
L. Ron.
Yes.
Hubbard. Did.
Yes, Hubbard. Yeah. Who also, I think, created Conan.
The Barbarian?
I think so. I'm going to look that up to make sure I'm not lying. But go ahead.
Yeah. Well, that idea, where you can create anything or create a personality, and that I think, it kind of really goes back to that.
That was Robert E. Howard. For some reason, L. Ron Hubbard and Robert E. Howard got me confused. I was like, he wrote Conan as well. You're like, really? Let me just fact check that real quick. So it was.
Check that real quick.
I'm sorry, Robert E. Howard, for attributing your work to another person.
But it is that, it's that ease, the ease of joining a cult or creating a cult of personality. Mm-hmm. We're breeding that.
Especially now, globally.
Yeah, we call them influencers.
Yes, that's right.
The cult of personality idea, that makes it so confusing. When you find a spiritual master, you feel this vibration or like love. And then we do things, right? Like we offer our head to the lotus feet of our guru in Indian spirituality, or that kind of thing can be so misunderstood from the outside. But truly the mark of it is an internal offering of one's head to God, like that deeper thing. No matter how many times you show yourself bowing to someone else and take a photograph, project it in, thousands of places like TikTok, it still may not be truly an authentic portrayal of you. Have you seen some of these movies on cult figures on Netflix lately?
I think I might have seen one or two, I think a while ago. Probably nothing current, though.
There's one incredibly deeply disturbing about Osho.
Oh, well, I've heard little bits and pieces about Osho, even though the writing of Osho is incredible. The books I've read of his insight is great. But I heard about the early part of Osho's life, a bit of a scoundrel and a con artist. And then, at some point in time, kind of became a joke and then got better and got on a path of spirituality. I mean, I don't know whether it was just a deeper con, but I just don't know the whole story. Like, I only dip in on books as opposed to current news of him.
Well, Wild Wild Country is a Netflix series. And what's brilliant about the way it's done, it's a documentary, is it doesn't really focus on Osho or Rajneesh. Not that, the quote unquote guru or spiritual teacher. It actually focuses on his main disciples, his followers. Okay. And I think it's just brilliantly put together as a documentary, because it's almost like the guru or idea of that master or cult leader, really, the psychological mind so warped that, it's like you create horrid things for yourself and others. Like there's all these like swings, right, in psychology. And I think with this documentary, what's fascinating is that you see all of these people who just want love, baby. They just want free love.
At the end of the day, you need a hug and someone to tell you it's going to be okay.
We all do. It's like we all want a hug and we all want to be told that it's okay. The way that this documentary is done is that, it's like here's a spiritual reader from India. And India, everyone should visit India, but everyone who goes to India has a totally different perspective of India than the next person. I love India for that. It is the wildest, most democratic place I've ever been to.
And the documentary is called Wild Country?
Wild, Wild Country.
Okay.
It's about his main followers, who I would term spiritual narcissists.
Okay.
Narcissism at its finest, spiritual bypass at its hilt. It's about them creating a commune for Osho in Oregon in this quiet, sleepy little town made of mostly, I think, there's probably like farmers and, it's just a small town. And then here's this invasion of hippies, cult followers, looking for group love.
Ooh.
What I love about the documentary, and documentaries being so incredibly special to create, because a documentary is objective journalism.
Yeah, we're in the age of great documentaries. Documentaries used to be whack or boring. And then they got sexy.
And this one is so, it's fantastic because the people who put it together interview both the people of the town and then these spiritual cult followers and leaders of Osho. They don't interview Osho. at all. They actually put the documentary together, way past Osho's death.
Okay.
Some of these followers are still alive. Yeah.
Gotcha. What time period is all this happening around? Is it current or in the 70s or 90s, 80s, 2000?
I think it was like 80s.
Okay. All right. I thought it was like current. I was like, oh man, Osho's really good, but I don't know how his story ended. I didn't even know he had passed.
It's so intriguing to watch the creation of a cult leader because, like you said, his books, there's good things about Osho. And then there's even, it's like talking to some of my friends, who are in spiritual circles and very, it's like, well, that's the way of the master. That's like true mastery on some level, like Osho, where it was like he really didn't give a damn what anyone thought.
No.
That he was just going to pull the crap out of humanity. And the crap came out. And the crap comes out. In terms of like, having worked with gurus myself and having pretty strong spiritual practice that is questioned. That's part of the thing. It's like not projected on others. Having had all these teachers, premise has always been like, no matter what I say, until you experience this is just concept. This is just fluff. And you do all these practices to have an actual experience for yourself and then understand yourself. But yes, there has to be questioning. You cannot be, no person is an island. We can't, we have to go to different people and friends and have relationships, constantly question ourselves before we become an accidental megalomaniac. And Osho accidentally became a megalomaniac. Megalomaniac. How do I say that?
I feel like in spiritual practice or in anything when you're following on a path, there is a point or a place of departure everyone is either somewhat aware of or it's in the corner haze of the mind of consciousness to be aware of. You decide how deep you're going to go, and then there's a cliff, if you will, or a void or a chasm. You can launch off this thing and go far beyond into an area where have departed from your normal circle and surroundings or connections with people. There's an edge somewhere. Launch into a whole nother level of spirituality or madness or neuroses. But it's one of those things where you have to be strong and sure and honest and authentic to navigate it. There is a line or a place that you walk alone in it for a while. That whole long night of the soul.
I think you and I have said that so many times in our long friendship in this lifetime, where a spiritual path is actually a path of solitude.
Yes. It's very personal, direct, individual.
What have we learned on spiritual bypass?
Spiritual bypass, not to do it.
Not to do it. Don't go to your spiritual practice. And if you have deep psychological wounds, which spiritual practice will bring up,
yes,
take care of that. Don't hide behind a facade.
Well, I mean, the whole point is you're going there to strengthen your spirit. You shouldn't front on that, basically. I'm going to quote Michael Jordan, cheat the game will cheat you. Stay true to the game will stay true to you. So you stay true to your practice, you stay true to being authentic, you'll get blessed, even if you joined a cult.
You're definitely going to have to do the word on the accidental cult joining.
Yes. But you will get blessed. Like, even if, someone's giving you false teachings, there's something inside all of us that there's a bell that rings when we hear the truth.
Yeah.
A deep truth. There's a bell that rings. Sometimes, or something sounds good and you're like, something's off. And it's just like, I don't understand this. This was explained well, but this doesn't seem right. Like there's something that we've all come loaded with that, things when things are true. This is outside of us self-deluding ourselves on things. But just when we hear the truth and you're kind of like, I don't fully understand it, but it sounds right. Like, let me think on it. It might take a while to digest or whatever. But, if you follow the path, if you're honest and, that honest where you can look at yourself, you look in the mirror or look into yourself and do an honest assessment. And by honest, I don't mean mean or blunt or cruel, just honest, honest, loving, caring, authentic.
I think spiritual bypass says meet all of your emotions, feelings, thoughts, even the dark ones, even the nightmarish ones, even the sad,
Mhm.
deep angst, all of it, like with great love. But don't just sweep it under the rug and ohm at people.
You're right, because the spiritual bypass is like you're not dealing with any of the things in you or that you have to deal with. You're just actually ignoring it and trying to paint over it with a spiritual
magic marker.
I was about to say wah, but it's woo woo.
It's literally when you go in and you're like, well, I need food on the table. And somebody tells you, well, then pray to God. I'm like, all right, well, there's only enough praying to God I can do to get food on the table. Or I could grow some food, or do something. There is a place for prayer, and there's also a place for sowing one's garden.
Oh yeah, it's like that whole scripture. It says, "Faith without deeds is useless," or as the old African proverb goes, "When you pray, move your feet." You're praying for success and to be blessed on what you need to do, but you can't just stand around and do nothing. That's not how it works.
Or do all this spiritual gymnastics, whatever it is, rituals. And then, it's like when you need to pay the bills or when you take care of other people or take care of yourself, there's nothing there.
Jim Carrey had something, I'm going to find out what the quote is and say it for next time. But he talked about you have to decide whether you're going to really be yourself or go to your grave hanging on this false version of yourself and have never given yourself a chance. I'm paraphrasing, but I mean, it was very powerful what he said. Decide to give yourself a chance.
That is a man right there, Jim Carrey, with many ghosts and things.
Oh, yeah.
But authentic.
And he messed up. Yeah, he messed up. Like, he did a lot of reckless stuff. But at the end of it, he's like, yeah, this is what I learned.
This is what I learned. And it's that sense of honesty. And I think, for me, I have gained a lot from going to Western psychologists, Western therapy in all of its different modalities and its different ways of really helping the mind. But I also have a really, really strong spiritual practice. I think that the two really do go hand in hand. However much that kind of deep work psychologically and spiritually does take up a bit of time. That, when I suggest to people that they find therapy, go to therapy, like it can be met with like my reputation as a person who doesn't need therapy. Right? It's like, well, maybe your reputation as an unkind, deeply hurtful, wounded person could change into, your other aspects, your higher aspects, the transcendent aspects of what we believe as enlightened, or truly, truly kind.
Oh, yeah.
When you meet all of those ghosts inside of yourself with great love and care in the care of a therapist.
Yeah. And the other also fear is being afraid that other people will do to you what you've done to them. That extra curse, being judged as they judged others.
That's really the deepest thing, right? Like why people are inauthentic, and then the inauthenticity and spiral into violence and negativity and hatred and all of that is,
Yes.
And then yet like wanting to have a good reputation. Like what you said, the reputation is so much more important than...
It's more real than you. That's the crazy power of it, where it's like you're clinging on to a construct that's not even you, to invest your essence or your spirit into fabrication because you value that over yourself. Crazy.
It's craziness. Yeah. There's so much of the emphasis on being famous and like popularity.
Yeah.
And yeah, you can be a popular despot. You could be a popular dictator. You could be a popular assassin. You could be a popular ruthless murderer. I mean, we've seen that, with Hitler and, we've seen that historically and everywhere throughout the world. It's not the goal.
Well, not only that, look at Anthony Bourdain. I mean, that man's job was to fly around the world and eat different kinds of food in different cultures and get paid lots of money for it. And he killed himself.
Right. That's right there is the essence of like lack of deep spirituality, lack of mental health resources, right? That mental illness and spirituality can kind of go hand in hand. They're one hair away from each other. Yeah.
And I feel like they do go hand in hand because sometimes what happens is there's sometimes a war between the heart and the mind.
Yes.
Better to have these things work in harmony, but in the end, the heart always wins. The heart will not be denied. So it would rather have insane freedom than live in a sane prison.
Yes. Anthony Bourdain, Kate Spade, Purse Lady, I mean, billionaire, right? And you look at it from the worldly standpoint, success in the world, deep mental health issues. You know, there's a beautiful movie in Bollywood that I love, PK. There's an actor and he plays a character named Sarfaraz, but he's a very famous Bollywood actor. And in the movie, he's just this light being, and he ended up killing himself. And, you know, and according to his psychiatrist, you know, he was bipolar. His name is Sushant Singh Rajput. When you see him perform, and certainly his reputation was amazing in Bollywood, and you see this light being, you know, it's like but we don't really know what was going on in his mind. We don't know that. And that's that thing where it's like, yeah, spiritual bypass, don't do it, understand it, view it. And I do believe in seeking help, mental help. The field of psychology is different from the field of spirituality, but they go hand in hand. And so having resources in both is super important. Yes, if you have a guru like Sri Brahmananda Saraswati, who is also known as Dr. Ramamurti S. Mishra, who happened to have a psychiatry degree from McGill and was also a neurosurgeon while being, a great spiritual master. If you happen to find these people who are very rare, then you might get it all in one package. Our world really does require that we are a patchwork quilt, where we are each a thread in one giant quilt. And these threads weave and flow with one another. And therefore we get help and aid from one another and from different sources. Yes. And that's absolutely having worked so much in the realm of a spiritual yoga teacher or a yoga teacher, and saying to folks, I think it would be great if you sought a psychotherapist. The negativity backlash I have gotten from that suggestion has been.
Yeah, well, and I'm sure, because sometimes like, let's end the stigma. And I'm like, hey, is there a stigma with mental health or therapy? Yes. The answer is yes, which is why they're talking about it.
I believe some of these spiritual masters, Rudrananda being the one, he said this world is a psycho ward of the universe. This is the psycho ward of the universe, this world that we're in. You come in here, you are going to work out some really deep psychological stuff for the higher path of spirituality. It's not all rainbows and snowflakes and
no, not at all. Not
and unicorns.
At all.
You're going to be meeting with the devil himself. You either become the devil or you transcend the devil. It's not pretty stuff. And you need some hand-holding. That stigma, right? Psychotherapy, mental illness, all of that. It's there because it's an unlooked at necessity for, I believe, all beings to truly, truly function in this world that doesn't let us be in the flow.
Not only that, I look at it also as in, the experiment of you putting eternal beings in temporary flesh, there's going to be problems.
Right. That's beautiful.
I'm like, is God a prankster? Why? Like, why did you, if we're immortal, forever being spirits, and then we're just locked into this physical body and then put on this planet? Because the universe is massive. And we're here on we're like crumbs on a dust molecule floating through darkness.
You must watch the movie PK.
Okay. All right.
There's a whole thing with PK. That is it just hits everything that you said, it's almost a segue to that. It's almost a segue to watching PK.
I'll put that on my to-do list of seeing. All right.
Thanks for joining us on The Word with Sumukhi and Damien Davis.